Hi there, Sramana. Welcome to
Hi,
breakingthe9to5jail.com.
good to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for the time you have taken to answer some of our questions, and I'm very sure all the answers are going to help our readers. Now, let me start with talking about your book that I have had and I have read already, Entrepreneur Journeys Bootstrapping, Weapon of Mass Reconstruction. Why don't you tell us a little about you and the books and how it all started?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. I did 3 startups of my own earlier on in my career, actually very early on. I was a graduate student at MIT when I started my first company. And as a first-time entrepreneur, as you can imagine, I was a very naive entrepreneur. I had good instincts. I had a lot of courage, which I think is the most important quality of an entrepreneur. But there was so much to learn, and as I then switched to the consulting role, I've worked with so many companies over the years, for almost 9 years now. And again, people make so many mistakes. I've seen so many business cases of mistakes and, trials and struggles and so forth. And then when I started writing my blog, which was in 2005, I would say, I was writing about things that came to my mind, and I was sharing my thoughts. And as I developed a readership, a lot of people came to me asking for mentorship and asking their own questions. And overall this, I think one thing that struck me as a very, something that would be an incredibly useful service would be to be able to put a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs in touch with other people who have done successful ventures of their own and their journeys and the lessons that they've learned from their journeys. This is how I've learned. I've had somehow developed access to a lot of experienced, successful entrepreneurs, and I learned from their work. And I wanted to bring that knowledge to a larger base of people.
Great, great. Now, talking about your latest book, Bootstrapping, Weapon of Mass Reconstruction. Bootstrapping, doing more with less. Pretty much everyone from Congress, our President Obama, to us, everyday people on the main street. Everyone is trying to do more with less, and I guess bootstrapping is all about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the concept of bootstrapping and how average aspiring entrepreneurs like us can actually deploy this concept in our entrepreneurial ventures?
I have to laugh because President Obama is trying to do more with less, with trillions of dollars. Really? I think you need some lessons in bootstrapping.
No, maybe not if you look at it, but the way he, and I don't want to get into a political argument here, but the way he tries to explain that how things will fund themselves and in the long run they will be cheaper and stuff like that. To me, again, not being a bootstrapping strategy coach or consultant, I don't know much about it, but the way he explains that things are going to self-fund and that money is already there, it sounds like a bootstrapping concept to me.
Okay. Let me get some basics definitions straight here.
Sure.
If you have access to millions, billions, and trillions of dollars, you're not bootstrapping. The whole notion of bootstrapping is working with a very small amount of cash, whether it's or your own personal savings or maybe a little bit of friends and family money. It is doing things with very little upfront cash investment. That's the fundamental cardinal rule of bootstrapping. So your assumption is that you're going to work with very limited resources. You're going to work with a small amount of money, and you're going to self-generate as much as possible by revenues from your business itself, or maybe you're going to moonlight, which is a good segue into your audience of this breaking the 9-to-5 jail concept, right?
Yeah.
You have a job. Somebody else is paying you. You have a 9-to-5 job, but 9-to-5 is still not that long, right?
Yeah.
It's 8 hours. You have another 16 hours of your day, even if you leave, let's say 6 hours for sleep, another 6 hours for family, you still have a lot of time in your hands to do something else with. And so that's another way of bootstrapping, is using your 9-to-5 job as your bootstrapping capital.
Yeah.
Right? If you take 20% of what you're making in salary and you build, and the time that you have access to, if you do something with that, if you start building something with that, there is another form of bootstrapping.
Yeah, that's a very wonderful concept. And like, I believe a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs are actually like, by default trying to do that. Maybe not utilizing the whole 20% concept of like, putting salary, aside and like, using that, very professionally doing it. But a lot of people are doing that. And that's a very beautiful concept.
And if you look at, the book that you're talking about, Bootstrapping, Weapon of Mass Reconstruction, if you look at, for instance, Om Malik's story.
Yes.
Om Malik was a journalist at Business 2.0.
Yeah.
He was doing his blog while he was doing Business 2.0. Om was hardly sleeping. I'm not recommending that necessarily, but he was doing this in parallel. So by the time he was ready to leave Business 2.0 to do his blog full time, he had built up a significant amount of momentum in his venture. And that's what I'm talking about when I recommend bootstrapping, using your 9-to-5 job, what you call 9-to-5 jail, as your bootstrap capital. That's the concept I'm talking about.
Yep. Now, you have been into you have earned so many hats. You are now a serial entrepreneur, you are an author, you are a blogger, you are a Forbes columnist, you are a strategy consultant, and I'm very sure there were so many other roles as an entrepreneur in between that you must have played. Would love to hear more about your entrepreneurial aspirations, if you can go back a few years and talk about your startup challenges and stuff.
Well, for me, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
So, I'm an entrepreneur's daughter. My father was a shipping entrepreneur, so I kind of grew up in that environment. So for my, value system, this notion of risk-taking, of entrepreneurship, of challenges, of, controlling your own destiny, this is the value system that I admired, I looked up to. This is the value system that was core to my sensitivity.
Right.
So when I was kind of like, I went to do computer science and economics for undergraduate, then I did a computer science master's. I was in the PhD program at MIT. And one day I basically walked into my advisor's office at MIT and I pulled up enough guts to tell him that, I'm in the PhD program, but really what I really want to do is become an entrepreneur as soon as possible. And so it turned out that my advisor was also entrepreneurial. He was doing startups while he was a professor at MIT, and he, by this time, he has done 3 of those also. So he is also a serial entrepreneur. So we were kind of, at some level, we were kindred spirits, but he was on his first venture at that time. I was about to start my first venture. So, it was early on in both of our careers. But he supported me, and he started introducing me to people and so forth. So he connected a few dots for me, which were very helpful to move along. So in terms of aspirations, I think it was not like I had a brilliant idea or anything. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then from there on, I figured out things as I went along, and I learned more. I taught myself everything there is to know. Because as you can tell, I'm not a business school graduate. I'm not, I'm basically a technologist. I was working on very hardcore technology. Yeah. So my transition from a technologist to an entrepreneur was largely self-taught.
Wow.